Last week, you may recall, we had a discussion about Bikur Cholim with regard to Corona. And the week before, we discussed the issue of making a bracha when one is very excited about the vaccine. And I got a hold of a sefer that just came out this month, for the month of Adar, called the Minchas Asher of Rav Asher Zelig Weiss. And he addresses both of these questions. In the question that we discussed about Bikur Cholim, and we went through an entire tshuva, the Big Day Chamudos, 5-6 pages long, which was to some extent an analysis of a tshuva, the Ramah, where the Ramah says that even with regard to infectious diseases, there's a mitzvah Bikur Cholim, and the only exception was Rasan, some sort of leprosy, where you have to stay far, far away. You don't go anywhere near the leper of that particular sort or species of leprosy. And the Big Day Chamudos reinterpreted the Ramah in order that the Ramah should not contradict himself, because the Ramah elsewhere writes that a person should not put his life into danger for the sake of someone else's benefit. And the Ramah also codifies the Maril that if there's Dever Ba'ir, then a person should either lock themselves up in quarantine or should run away from the city. All this indicates that the Ramah is very, very aware of the halachic implications of infectious diseases. And therefore, to reinterpret the Ramah in such a way that he should not contradict himself, the answer is that yes, we do have an obligation to visit even someone who is ill with an infectious disease, but we have to take the proper precautions. And the Ramah believes that you could be Mekayim, the mitzvah Bikur Cholim, and at the same time take the precautions that are necessary. And it goes level by level. Either you could come within a certain distance of him so that he could see you and you get a face-to-face view, and you could communicate with him directly. That would be ideal. Or if you can't go that far, you're outside the room. If he's not available, you'll leave a message that you were there. And if that's not possible, then we take it down one more level, and we mekayim the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim on the telephone or over some sort of technology, Zoom, whatever it might be. But the Ramah certainly holds that you can take precautions even in the case of an infectious disease, and you're obligated in the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim. That is the Ramah's position, and that's his ruling. We have to figure out in every case, what can we do to maximize the Bikur Cholim without endangering ourselves? That's the Ramah's Shita. Just to give you in a nutshell what we discussed last week. The Ramah holds that in the case of Choli Rasan, there's no way that you can take protection. The Ramah holds that the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim applies even without seeing the Chola. And we made a big deal about that because in the case of Kala, it could be if the Kala is being taken out to the chuppah, you will close your Gemara, leave the base medrash, join the entourage, and that based on Re'iyah because you saw her. But in the case of Bikur Cholim, whether you saw the Chola or you didn't see the Chola is irrelevant. You never see the Chola. The Chola is Mishkav, is somewhere lying in bed, and you're aware of the fact that there's a Chola and the Chola could use your help. And you try to figure out how you can maximize the help, whether by taking care of the Chola's needs, perhaps you can get medical information that you have access to that the Chola doesn't know about, perhaps you can even bring the Chola certain foods or whatever it might be, but just figure out how to maximize Bikur Cholim. And the Minchas Asher blows the whole thing off. What can I tell you? I don't want to say publicly, somebody might quote me that I'm totally disappointed. I don't want to say that. But basically he says that the Ramah was unaware of something called an infectious disease. He thought, the Ramah, that all these diseases that you're talking about are somehow in the air. And because the Ramah didn't have the medical knowledge, therefore he paskins that we're chayiv and bikur chol. But we know what the Ramah didn't know, namely that there's a problem, a serious problem of coming in contact with infectious diseases. And at the end of the long tshuva, the Minchas Osher comes to the conclusion that the only possible way you can salvage a tip of the iceberg of bikur cholim in the case of corona is with a phone call. And he's not exactly happy about that because he thinks that a phone call is not really the mitzvah of bikur cholim. So as last week we understood that the Ramah goes full-fledged forward, 3 F's, and he obligates us in the mitzvah of bikur cholim, even in an infectious disease, just simply find a way of doing it. Use your brain, get consultation from whoever can help you out, and find a way of maximizing your bikur cholim, especially if you have a relationship with this cholim and you know him, and you can cheer him up, you can help him out. And quoting Rabbi Akiva in Masechta Nedarim, Kol she'eino mevaker sachol harei kilu shofech damim, and the Ramah is going to push and push in favor of bikur cholim, maximize it, whether it's Baycrest or wherever it is. And the Minchas Osher, no. The only infectious disease that the Ramah was aware of was Choli Rasan. And the Minchas Osher tries to figure out how could it be aware of Choli Rasan as an infectious disease, but not other infectious diseases, but that was the science of its time. So I invite you to learn the Minchas Osher, if you like. I'm going to stick with the Big Day Chamudos. That's my personal approach. That I don't have to influence you in any way. I'm not here to prejudice you, or maybe I am, but I can't do this. I can't take this and disregard a major piece of research. If you remember last week, the man, Rav Daniel Kleiman, was makif the entire sugya of bikur cholim from A to Z. You like that? Z. Okay. Joe? L'chaim on T. I don't know if you can make it.
Rav, I just with this tshuva of Rav Usher Weiss, when was it? From the beginning or from the
No, it was just published now. It doesn't. They don't give you a date on it. There are no dates on the tshuva. I'll double check that and see if I'm right. If you're interested,
you can't say that he agrees with the Ramah. It's just a question of how much of a precautions a person has to take.
Again, what do you mean he disagrees with the Ramah? Everybody's claiming that we agree with the Ramah. The question is, what did the Ramah say?
No, I'm saying
say something based on the science of his time, which is a very nice piece of research, if you like, or did the Ramah realize that visiting an infectious disease person is a problem, but find a way of solving the problem? Go through the entire sugya of bikur cholim with the ideal. Remember, we spoke last week that there's so many gradations in bikur cholim from here to there. Okay, I don't want to get excited about this. I can't tell you how I feel. Maybe you have a clue about how I feel about this. Maybe. Now, we had another issue about making a bracha on this vaccine. You're dancing in the streets. This could be a major change. And I have to tell you something. As of 2 days ago, there's been a major change in the policy here of the Israeli government. A major change. And that could be Jeff. That's why Jeff is getting on a plane. I don't know. Maybe it has nothing to do with this decision. But let me tell you something. The planes are flying now. I was invited for Pesach up north to a hotel called Nir Etzion. You're all invited to join me. Or maybe you could join my shiurim at least during Kol HaMoed on Zoom. Full-fledged ahead. Only if you have a green passport or you're a recovery case. I fit into both categories. But be that as it may, things are changing now. Now, am I going to tell you that this vaccine is the gift to the world? It's going to solve all our problems with COVID? Absolutely not. I'm not a Navi. I'm not a Ben Navi. I like my father, was a great guy, but he wasn't a Navi to my extent, to my best of my knowledge. He never claimed to be a Navi. So I don't know where this vaccine is going. But one thing I can tell you about the vaccine, it has had a major impact on our way of life here in Israel. And there's plenty to be happy with. I noticed in my own shul here that people who until Sunday, just a few days ago, were so super makbid. Not enough to cover your mouth, you got to cover your nose, and not the right nostril, but the left nostril, you got to cover both nostrils. I saw people who were covering their eyes, having their eyes look like a scene out of Arabia here. And now, all of a sudden, people are lowering their guard. We're talking about gatherings of 350 people or more with the okay of the government. And you don't want to make a bracha on that? You don't want to show that there's Yad Hashem? So again, you're invited to read the tshuva of the Minchas Asher. I photocopied 2 pages out of the tshuva, and basically, it's pretty boring, if I could say that. And all the man has to say is Safek Brachas Lahaka. I feel like I'm back in Clanton Park. Sabal, right? The whole... You got here a 400-page book here. And all the man could say is Safek Brachas Lahaka. I don't know. You'll read it. I don't want to prejudice you. Or maybe I do. All right. Today, I want to go back to a sefer that honestly, when I received this as a gift, it's called Lachios Amrav, or Rav Moshe Rutberg. He's a Rav in a shul in Lakewood, New Jersey. They don't call it Lakewood, they call it Thames River, a fancy name. And maybe, Bobby, you could do some research amongst your immediate family members. They must know who the man is. And frankly speaking, I'm very impressed. I am very impressed with his approach. He is in constant contact with what he calls Irgunei HaHatzalah. He's talking about the Bikur Cholim organizations and the Hatzalah organizations. Apparently, he's one of the big men in Paskening on issues for the Hatzalah movement. And I would like to share with you 3 tshuvas that he has, all of which are in a very short part of a long book on Shabbos, on the laws of Shabbos. Now, I don't know if he's a Torontonian, but he definitely quotes from Shlomo Miller left, right, and center. And the first tshuva is about donating plasma on Shabbos. Fascinating tshuva. Again, it's 2 sides of 1 page, but absolutely, we say in Yiddish, it's mamish to the point. And he talks about the case where they check a person for antibodies. He's batting 1,000. I'm adding that. And they call him up and they're begging him to come and donate plasma. And we're talking about a case where technically they have everything they need in this bank in order to extract his blood and have plasma. And is he allowed to do this on Shabbos? Now, he himself, who's donating his plasma, will not be violating the Shabbos in the act itself of drawing out his blood. That will be done by whoever does it. But in order to get access to the place where he will donate plasma, he will have to violate the Shabbos. Hashela hoisen mutala lasos came b'Shabbos lechalal es haShabbos kidei leches almanas litron, to give this contribution of plasma. V'hine bi'af shebe'etzem, he's presenting the question, be'etzem lekichas adam eina torem tzorach lechalal es haShabbos. But kidei lagia lemakom bank hadam, hadover karoch b'malachos asuros. He mentions chutz l'tchum. He offers the possibility of driving in a cab that's driven by a guy, which again, in New Jersey, that's not a problem. I would assume that most cab drivers in New Jersey, in that area of New Jersey, who are driving a cab on Shabbos are not Jews. But he says there are isurim. And again, if you would ask me to look this up in my newest sefer that I just got, I'm sure he would ask it. But listen to a man who is in the thick of things, and they're calling him up from Hatzalah, and they want to know, Torah hivalilmod on Isara, can I violate the Shabbos in one form or another in order to contribute plasma? He says, V'afal gav sheyochel oleches gam achar Shabbos. Why not wait till after Shabbos? You remember that we had a discussion once in the Minchas Osher, Rav Weiss, about participating in a lab testing out new vaccines. This is before we had a vaccine on Shabbos. All he has to do is get there. Maybe he has to operate a machshev, I don't know. And Rav Osher Weiss says, wait till after Shabbos. He says, Aval harbe mikrim yesh kan d'chia shetavi lidei sakonas hacholim. In many cases, by delaying the contribution of plasma, you may endanger the life of someone who is never dying and could be saved. The Torem, the gift of Dam, Mucheres, if you delay it, Tia Mu'ucher Midai. For this chola, it's going to be too late. Ad Kan Loshen Hashela. Now comes the truth. He says the following.
Bruce, on what page are you on?
The page, let me just think. I have it in the original, so you don't see the page numbers. It's Pei Hey in the book. In yours, it would say Lahachios Am Rav, page 1. Do you have such a page? I hope you have it. Okay, so it's Simon Yud, Trumas Dam Plasma B'Shabbat. He says you have to, before you even blink, you have to divvy up the question into two parts. There are two different scenarios. They may sound similar, but halachically, they are fundamentally different. One is, Yesh Chola Lifanenu. Someone is never in danger, and there he is. The plasma will go directly into his body. He says in this case, even if it would mean they would have to give the blood and violate the Shabbos in the giving of the blood, forget about the transportation, it would be Chil Shabbos, that's Mutar Midin Pikuach Nefesh, and there's no blinking, no hesitation about it, even on an Issa Dorais. And he says, even it's a suffix, we don't know if the plasma is going to save the Chola or not, violate Shabbos. However, Heichi she'eno yodua lo mihu hachole v'im ze holech yashir lechole. As they're telling him, we're going to use your plasma right now, but he doesn't see any chola. He doesn't know of any chola. Maybe yes, maybe no. They're being very dramatic about it at the bank plasma. Gam kein mutter. Because if it's during a magefa, bevada yesh cholim lefanenu, v'zen echshav pikuach nefesh. Again, we'll touch on the other issue here, but what if the chol is a god? Okay, we'll get to that later. That's where Shlomo Miller comes in. He says, however, what if the bank is collecting plasma? Right now, they have a minimum supply of plasma in the bank, but they need more. there definitely going to be more cholim coming into the hospital. It's a matter of time. And as we stand today, I think this is still true. Again, I don't know what goes on in Canada, but I can tell you in Europe, in Italy, in France, the numbers are still going up. I don't know how we're doing in the United States, where 500,000 people have already perished from this disease. So in order to address this question where they want to collect this plasma just in case, if you follow me, in other words, to have a supply of plasma, of antibodies, he quotes a tshuva, the Noda B'Yehuda. I think we've mentioned this tshuva in the past. The question is, somebody died of a rare disease, and we want to do a cadaver, a post-mortem dissection, and that's called the Tuche Mesim, in order to learn more about the disease so that we can be prepared in the event that another person will contract the same rare disease. And then Noda B'Yehuda says it's asur. And again, if we had time, we go through the 3 different isurim that are involved in the Tuche Mesim. He says, this is the language of the Noda B'Yehuda 3 centuries ago. Ein ze bechlal atzos nefashos, kevan she'ein hachol lefanenu. And therefore, he says, it would seem that to have any sort of violation of the Shabbos right now, for the sake of a bank plasma, somebody down the line, that should be also. It's not chola b'fanein. Now, this tshuva, the Noda B'Yehuda, over the course of centuries, has become a topic of debate. Because there are so many gray area situations in which now we don't have a chola l'fanenu, but we can anticipate that there will be a chola. And the Chazon Ish claims, this is already almost, wow. You're quoting the Chazon Ish today. In my day, it was like, it was like quoting the Minchas Osher. But today, the Chazon Ish is almost a century ago, 70, 80 years ago. And the Chazon Ish writes that the tshuva, the Noda B'Yehuda, was addressing a rare disease, and no one can predict when and who chas v'sholom would contract that disease. But he says, Ein chiluk beinim achola isa kaman or lesa kaman, where the chol is right there in front of us. Elatoli, what the Noda B'Yehuda means to say is ha'im adover matzu. Would this be a situation of a pandemic where the Gemara in Tainus says that we have to blow the chatzotros, we have to declare a fast day or a series of fast days? The havile ka'oivim shetzaru be'ir hasamuch l'sfar. So if it's b'shas shalom, we don't violate the Shabbos in order to go out to battle. But if on the other end, there's tension between our enemies and ourselves, and the enemies are moving towards a position of sieging, putting a siege on the city, then we go out and we fight a battle. And the Chazon Ish compares a pandemic to enemies that are threatening to siege the city. And even if it's not chola b'fanenu, says the Chazon Ish, the Noda B'Yehuda would concede that we will violate, in his case, nituche mesim, and in the case of the Chazon Ish, it's considered pikuach nefesh. We will violate the Shabbos. So now we're going to quote the tshuva of the Lahachios Amrav. He says, "B'nidon didan yesh cholen b'fanenu umuto lechalas haShabbos." What do you mean cholen b'fanenu? Where's the chola? Oh, yeah. I don't see any chola. You see any chola? He says it's matzur. It's going to be. Unfortunately, we haven't yet solved this problem. There are cholim coming in. Here in Israel, by the way, again, I don't know if you have the same thing in Canada. We don't encourage cholim, even if they're seriously ill, to go to the hospital. It's like the worst place in the world you want to be. So we have organizations that will come and treat you at home with some of the most sophisticated machines. Now you'll ask me, all right, so you're telling me it's motzi, there will be cholim, and it's equivalent to yesh cholim b'fanenu. But maybe it's a guy. He says, Kfar Horolanu Hagoyin Reb Shlomo Miller Shlita. Last time I saw Reb Shlomo Miller, I had yahrzeit for my father, Bo Yom, on Shabbos, and he allowed me to daven for the Amud on Shabbos at Vasikin. They have such kpedus over there about Vasikin. You know, the guy had to come over to me with, he told me second by second where I have to be for like an hour, you know what I'm saying? But they let me do it because it was Bo Yom, I had yahrzeit on that day. Anyway, Horolanu Hagon Reb Shlomo Miller Shlita, Kama Pa'amim, Legabi Shelos Elu. V'chein Legabi Shela Zu. And I also got his haskama on this particular question of plasma. Sheyesh Tamid Safek Imu Yehudi. There's always a possibility that he's a Jew in love. And I might add on my own, which I don't see here in the tshuva, that there's an issue of Ava. You know what I'm talking about? That if we don't do what we can do for them, they won't do what they can do maximize for us. Achen, where's the limitation? If they're only preparing the bank, they have no reason to anticipate that they will need it. There's only an outside chance that they'll need it. So they want to fill it up in the bank. Wait till tomorrow. Come on Sunday. They're open on Sundays, by the way. Even on Canada Day, I think. Oh, maybe they want to use his plasma to restructure it, remanufacture it, and create some sort of a cure for this disease. Oh, to learn more about the disease from your plasma. Oz, who mitzvah gedola, linasot lazar. It's a great mitzvah to try to help in this effort. Aval eno matzav dachuf shetalui biyom, v'shapi yichol mitchos ad achar Shabbos. He can delay it until Sunday at no great loss. The bottom line is, Rabosai, I would say that in 99 out of 100 cases, if they're asking you to come immediately, urgently, to the plasma bank, and it happens to be our Jewish Sabbath, and they need your plasma, in 99 out of 100 cases, I'm going to tell you now, based on this tshuva, it's mutter. The only exceptional case would be that they're talking about mechkarim, they want to do research, or they're talking about creating some sort of refuah, they want to use your plasma, they want to beef up the plasma bank. That's not what we're talking about, Rabbos. In those cases, efshar lisbol d'chiyah, we can tolerate delay. The next tshuva is tshuva yud aleph, which I assume should say, just please check me out on this, it should say, lahachios amrav number 3. Is there such a thing? I'm using the sefer itself, so I really should, maybe I should have done it a different way. Anyway, the Gemara tells us, it's actually Yerushalmi, in Masechta Yoma, part of the last chunk of Masechta Yoma deals with Pikuach Nefesh. And the Yerushalmi says that Hashoel, when it comes to a Chola who's in danger, life is in danger, Hashoel, if he runs around to ask a question, Hareze Shofech Dom. And based on this Yerushalmi, the Shulchan Aruch and Archaim Simon Shin Chaf Ches Paskins, that Misha Yesh Lo Choli Shal Sakana Mitzvah Chalav Es HaShabbos, Hazoriz Hareze Mishubach, Hashoel Hareze Shofech Dom. It's interesting that in the original, which is the Yerushalmi itself, and the Tur, when he codifies in Shin Chaf Ches, the Yerushalmi, he adds another phrase. The Yerushalmi has another phrase. Hanishal harezeh meguna. What does that mean? Hanishal. Hashoel is the shofech damin. Nishal is one notch lower. He's meguna. What do you mean a nishal? Somebody comes to ask me the question. So why do you fault me? I mean, what's been ixul? All right. Anyway, Sheila b'tkufas hakorona. Rachmana litzlan nischachu harbe shelos lechavri hatzola. He says that we have questions that are coming our way from the Hatzola people and various other organizations. Shenischachu she'elos elu sheme'olam lo danu behem. New questions, but the Torah has to respond to new questions. And he says, Harbe me'ashelot she'itziu, many of the questions that they brought to our attention were irrelevant to Pikuach Nefesh, but many of them were Pikuach Nefesh. And he has a phrase here, which I'm not sure where he's borrowing it from, called Matzav Bahul. Matzav Bahul means in English, an urgent situation. The Kol Rega V'Rega Yitochin Lasos Nafkamina L'Chaim U'L'Movis. Person's life is in the balance. He says, Borur, it's clear to me that Bahar Mikrim, in many cases, Yesh Tzorch Litkasher V'Lish'ol Es Das Harav B'Nidon. You can't just take the law into your own hands and say, I have to violate the Shabbos. In many situations, you have to ask the question. You have to get a horas chacham. Perhaps you could send it through a guy, have the guy record your question or transmit your question. However, Zeh Poshut Shi Tochen B'Harbe Mishelos Elu. He says in many cases, the answer will be negative, and you're not allowed to be Machal Shabbos, because those are cases where it's not a Matzav Bahul, it's not absolutely urgent. And once again, like we said before, with regard to the issue of donating plasma, that it's sovel dichud. It could tolerate delay. But other questions, he says, cannot tolerate delay. And therefore we invoke the Yushalmi, the Shulchan Aruch in Shin Chav Ches, Hashoel, Hareze, Shofech Damim. Every minute that he delays is a matter of life and death for the Chola, and now he's going to run around and try to contact the Rav and get an answer to his question. In the meantime, never somebody dies. And the Bala Machaber Sefer Lachis Hamrav wonders, why is it that the Shulchan Aruch omits 3 words in the Yushalmi that are brought down in the Tur, that Hanishal Hareze Megune? Why did he omit that? In any event, he goes through an analysis of what this means, Hanishal Meguna. These are pages that I didn't send you because, again, it's a long tshuva. And he says that what's Meguna about the Nishal? Apparently, the Nishal was negligent in the following way. To the same extent that the Shoel is to be taken to task because he's asking questions of and delaying the immediate therapeutic process, which could cause the death of somebody. He's a Shofech Damim. So too, the very fact that the Shoel is asking the question, he's running around trying to get a Ross from a psak of a Rav, that itself casts a very shady position on the Rav. Why didn't the Rav teach the people? Don't ask questions when there's a matter of pikuach nefesh. However, he quotes the Prisha, one of the super commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, who has a whole different take on the words Hanishal Harezem Meguna. And he says that Hanishal Harezem Meguna is a person who, despite all that's going on with dangerous illness in the air, who's makpid al hasheni, he says to me, hiterlecha, did you get a psak? And the Yerushalmi thinks that such an individual, who by implication is castigating the one who didn't ask the question, he failed to come to ask the question, I suspect that he's makpid al kvodo. Do you hear this, Rabbos? It's scary. That the reason why he is coming down hard on this person who paskin for himself is because of his own covet. Shalolahoro shum davar zulasa. Certainly not in matters of life. Just who? Who are you? You know the famous story. If you don't mind a little break, I like to tell stories. There's a famous story in a kfar, some sort of a village out back in Poland in that day, and the man's wife comes home with a chicken, and it's got a needle inside. So she asks her husband, what should she do? Should she take it to the Rav? So he says, what do you have to take it to the Rav? And he starts looking and looking. He says it's kosher. The whole community, this whole kfar, finds out that this, we'll call him a farmer. I don't want to use a negative term. He is a bucky and treifus. And the word comes back to the Rav. 2 days later, the man comes home to his wife, and he sees a man that's checking his horses, looking at the teeth, and he comes closer, and guess who it is? It's the Rav of the town. So he says to him, when did you become an expert on horses, Rabbi? He says, when did you become an expert on treifas? He says, when you stop posketing on treifas, I'll stop posketing on your horses. Hareze Maguna. When this person is makbid on his covet, why didn't you ask me the shaila? He basically inhibits people to such an extent that in a matzah of a situation of pigud nefesh, they'll ask the shaila. And hashoel hareze shofech damim. The priest asks, well, you know what? Maybe the nishal is a shofech damim. He says, no, that's only a grama. Whereas the shoel, who didn't, he's got the chola in front of him and he doesn't administer medical therapy immediately and violate the Shabbos, he is a direct dorem of shvichas dam. Okay.
So don't these two things contradict each other completely?
It's just a story, Joe. You don't ask a kasha on a story.
Not the story, no, but what you're saying.
You're asking at the horses and the teeth, or you're asking?
No, is it not that it's either that he shouldn't ask or he must ask? So which one is it?
Well, again, what's the situation? We're talking about a situation in which there's a chola, and his life is hanging by a thread, and you're going to somehow get a guy or this and that to call up the Rav. You have the trans. Because you're in the Hatzolah group, and you're going to decide that I can't administer any violation of the Shabbos, any therapy, because I got to get an answer from the Rav. That person is a shofech dam. And the Rav, apparently, who's the nishal, apparently he didn't give clear instructions that in such a scenario, go ahead and violate the Shabbos if need be. There's an urgent case of pikuach nefesh. The Rav is an indirect orem. He's also a meguna. Again, I wouldn't call him a shofech damim, but this is fat. Okay. Now, at this point in the tshuva, again, I apologize, I couldn't photocopy all the pages. He quotes the Aruch HaShulchan. Shin Chav Ches, again, the same scene. The Aruch HaShulchan quotes the Or Zarua, who in turn quotes the Ritzvah, one of the Balei HaTosfos. And he says the following. Bechole shezmano bahul. It's absolutely urgent. V'hu misukan gadol. He's in a great dire danger. Kol rega meruba etzo. Every minute is like 100 hours for a normal person. Bazeh vadai ein makom l'sheila ve'ein makom l'tshuva. We don't ask questions. We don't want to get answers. Osim kol masha bicholes. Libli lidagdek, v'yeh Shabbos kechol mamish. Shabbos is like a weekday. Aval bechol she'ein zmanu bohu v'adei sheyesh she'elos. Certainly, you should be asking questions if it's not urgent. V'chein minhag ha'mokom. He tells you that in Litha, that's the way we did it. Now, again, I'm fast forwarding about 8 pages of this tshuva because I want to get on to other topics today. And in this tshuva, it's amazing he has another she'ela in the tshuva, which almost is more fascinating to me than the she'ela itself. Because I can tell you based on the Aruch HaShulchan exactly where he's navigating. He says, Maisa, this you have, I guess it would probably say, Lahachios Hamrav, page, yikes. Page 4, page 3, page 5, page, I don't know. Anyway, you should see a paragraph, V'chein hoya Maisa. This was a Maisa of a Mefaked Gdud Chayalim, and he decides on Friday night that we have to uproot the troops, the battalion, on a Friday night, and go from one hilltop and reestablish it in another hilltop. And his purpose is training. Very often in the army, again, I didn't get to this by Draga, of course. I was doing what they call shlab bed. But in the army, for the real guys, it's very often that in a war situation, you have to uproot the whole battalion in minutes. So we have to train you in that. Now, some of the chayalim in this particular battalion were shomrei mitzvot, and they doubted whether this is mutter on Shabbos. It's a very important training exercise, but does it have to take place on Shabbos? And the Mefaked says that for various reasons, based on army, military considerations, he calls them chikulim mivtzayim. Mivtza means the how do you say in English, the confrontation with the enemy, whatever it is. He says this is pikuach nefesh. So imagine you've got a Mefaked. Shabbos doesn't mean that much to him, unfortunately. And he's telling you that based on his military expertise, we have to do this on Shabbos. Hazazat hayichida mashmuta bitzua alfei pu'ulos shel avos melachos v'toldoseim. Thousands of violations of Shabbos. There was one particular chayal that, for whatever reason, he had to stay put in the original base. He was not part of the transfer of the base. And he finds out that the whole thing was a bluff. And when the Mefaked called it pikuach nefesh, it was a bunch of hogwash. Again, I wish I had I have to look it up in the dictionary. How do you say mivtza'i? When you're involved in a mivtza, when you're facing the enemy.
Conflict?
No. There's a technical word for it in English. It's a military. Look up if somebody can look it up while I'm talking. Otherwise, I have to take a hefsek, which I don't have time for. Anyway, lo hoya kan shum tzrach pikuach nefesh. Hachayal hirim biyado es hatelephone lemefakeret ha-chativa. I'm sorry, lemefkeret ha-chativa. Mefkeret ha-chativa means that he went over the head of this mefaked to the mefakeret ha-chativa lidavech al kavanato shel hamagad lechalel et hashabbat lelo hatzdaka mivtzait. And even though this chayal, by picking up the phone to contact the Mefaked, he himself violated the Shabbos, and certainly in the Mefked, they were violating the Shabbos. There was chil Shabbos. Hashelai ha'im mutar lo lavar iser zuta kedei sheimona harbe chilulei Shabbos. One iser of making a phone call to try to stave off thousands of violations of malachos d'oraisa v'toldoseim. Rabbosai, what would you say? Is he allowed to do? You say no, Joe? I would say, for sure. What are you talking about? One violation to save Chil Shabbos of Doraisa after Malacha certainly should be mutter.
They don't know, though. The people don't.
Joe, you are brilliant. I'm going to rename you. I shouldn't name you after someone who's gone, but tzaddikim afil b'misasam nikruv chaim. You are Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Reb Shlomo Zalman said it was also to do such a thing because the Chayalim don't know what this guy knows, and from their perspective, they are in a pikuach nefesh situation, and therefore there's no avera on their behalf. You're doing it deliberately. They took the same shaila to guess who? If you've been following me the whole shir, to Rav Moshe Zelig Weiss, and he paskined that Adarabba, you have to violate the Shabbos in an Isur Zuta for the sake of avoiding so many Isurim. And therefore, the Minchas Osher paskins that in the Hatzola organization, Legabe Kama Michavri Hatzol Shiyotzel Pikuach Nefesh Ukshemagia Lisham Harishon Roshik Kvar Lohoi Shum Sakana. So that this whole group of Hatzola people are out there to save a life, and one of them gets there first, and he realizes, he becomes aware of the situation, that there's no sakana. Ha'im mutar lechaver zeh. If this member of the Hatzola organization allowed to do a Maisa Shvus, mind you, a Shvus, Yidei Lodia Chevre Hatzola, Limnoa harbe avos malachos al yidei shar chevrei hatzola. Mamish, the same question that we saw here in the army situation. And I'm telling you, Rabbosai, this is so, I'm more interested in this tshuva for this aspect of the tshuva than I am for the question of whether he has to ask the shaila or not ask the shaila. Hashoel raise the shofet tovim. Says the Minchas Osher. Bivadai mutar lahodia lacherim. He's allowed to tell the acherim. And he says, Kidai lasos isur kal limnoach chilul Shabbos. This chaver of Hatzola should violate an isur kal to protect and prevent serious violations of Chil Shabbos on the part of the Chevrei Hatzola. He should go ahead and do it. Achein sha'alti mipi hagoyin Rav Yosef Sholem Elyashiv. This Rav Moshe Rotberg says, I went to ask the same exact shaila to Rav Elyashiv. Zecher Tzadik Livrocha v'Horoli she'ein lahodia lahem klal. Did not notify the other members of the Hatzola group. V'chein yibada l'chaim. I asked this question to Agon Reb Yitzchak Zilberstein and to Agon Reb Shlomo Miller Shlita. And they all agreed to the original psak of Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach that you do not violate the Shabbos, even in a low ebb violation, to prevent Chilul Shabbos of Malachos Harbe Doraisa V'Toldoseihem, because they don't know about it. And sometimes what you don't know doesn't hurt you. It's better not to know than to know. So the Minchas Osher today is sort of, we'll call it outvoted, okay? I've mentioned him a few times. Now, as far as the original shaila is concerned, he says, La halacha b'pikuach nefesh, yesh halacha shel shoel, harei zeh shofech damim. If you're going to dilly-dally to send a shaila to ask the Rav, you're causing someone's death. Achein zeu heichan shal matzav bahul. Again, the same phrase that we saw in the Aruch HaShulchan. It's an immediate, urgent situation. Achein kasher shehut. If there's time, ubali lavar al isurim yachol l'shol tashela. He says that the amount of isurim, the violations here, are very low ebb. You could send the shaila through an akum. Is he tochen shetzarich lishol b'chai gav? If the situation tolerates delay, you should ask the shaila. But here's the punchline. Im yesh safek. He doesn't know. She'ulai hamatzav bahu. Maybe it's urgent. Ve'ulai yesh nafkusa l'sakanta al yidei dichui shel kol rega. As HaShoel, if he goes and he asks the Shaila, raises shofech domin. V'anishal harezim meguna. Rav Rudberg doesn't want to be a nishal. He doesn't want the question to be asked to him. He's not makbid on his cover. He wants to tell the people publicly in this book, that he paskins that they shouldn't ask for a psak because it's a suffix and a possibility that it's a matzav bahu. Uli etzem ha'sheila ha'im l'chalel Shabbat k'dei l'sh'ol sheila shu suffix ba im muter im lav harei af b'li she'yavara dover muter machmas suffix memele ein l'chal Shabbos levarer b'kuda zu. He says that if we're in a suffix situation and he doesn't know for sure, then afilu b'li she'yavar, even if he doesn't clarify the thing, muter machmas suffix.
Please clarify, Rav, about the emergency situation. So what is it? One person knows what?
The member of the Hatzalah does not realize one way or the other whether it's a matzav bahul. He doesn't know. He's in a suffix situation. Maybe he could tolerate delay. Maybe he should ask the Shaila. He could violate a low ebb chilul Shabbos rather than violate Shabbos on a high level, on an intense, severe level. And the cholah might survive. But he doesn't know for sure one way or the other. That too is included in Hashoel, Harezeh, Shofech, and Dom. And finally, as far as Lachios Rav is concerned, are you allowed to take vitamins on Shabbos during Corona? And this is based on a Mishnah at the end of Masechet Shabbos, Kuf Tes. And the Mishnah gives a whole list of certain kinds of herbs and things that are medicinal, and you're not allowed to take them on Shabbos unless you're a real cholah, but not what's called mechush. So we'll try to explain this. He says, "B'matzav zeshel magefas hakorona, harbe ratzu lakachas vitaminim, ubefrat vitamin C v'zinc. Shalafia mechkarim yesh sikui gadol." It's very possible that if you take these vitamin C tablets and zinc tablets, hema ozrim beribui cholia corona. If you have corona, they can help you get out of it. And some take it, right now they're healthy, but they feel it would prevent them getting infected by the disease. So you're allowed to take these shufot on Shabbos. There are some who already feel weak. Maybe they don't have fever, but they're feeling a lot of the people in my family that had COVID complained about feeling very tired, like fatigue. And that was the extent of their, oh, you had that? That was the extent of their, how do you say in English, tasminim, of their symptoms. General weakness and fatigue. I had it with the smell, that's very common, but it didn't hit me till months later. Don't figure out why. Anyway, so he says the following. The basic rule that underlies the Mishnah, if we want to summarize it, is if there's some machal, something that you take in your mouth that is eino machal briim, healthy people would not normally eat such a thing, as ein heteli ochlam, if he's not a chole, which means he's not lying in bed with fever, he's anything but, he's basically classified as a bari. A bari is not allowed to take into his body on Shabbos that which is eaten for refuah. Normally, it's not machal briim. And it's codified by the Rambam in Perek Chaf Al Hilchos Shabbos. Fine. And he says that the Ktsos HaShulchan and the Iglei Tal, basing themselves on, again, the Nod of Yehuda keeps coming up, the Nod of Yehuda, the Tzlach, that ha'ochel machal briim, if you're eating something that is normally eaten even by healthy people, but he's eating it litzarech refuah, so he wants to strengthen his body, that's what's motivating him, but it's basically classified as machal briim, then it's not included in the gzera of refuah on Shabbos, and it's mutter. So let's just summarize the two rules. Rule number one is if something is machal cholim, it's not a machal briim under normal cases. If he's a bari or he has mechuchin, but he's not a real chola, that's when the gzera was instituted. He's not allowed to take food that is normally not eaten. It's not machal briim. If, on the other hand, it's machal briim, then he's allowed to take it, even though he's doing it for the purpose of refuah. And the Nod explains that this Isur was not based on the person himself. I mean, the person himself knows that he's doing it for refuah, but it's based on the onlooker, the spectator, whether it's nikar l'shem refuah, it's not nikar l'shem refuah. That's why a lot of poskim, this is my own footnote here, allow you to take these medications if you're not a chol, even if you're not a chola, by mixing it into, applesauce or I don't know what. You'll be creative. Now we're on the next page, and he says the following. There's a major machlokes between the Beit Yosef and the Shulchan Aruch and the Prisha and the Pri Megadim and the Levush. Okay, many different poskim that reject the leniency of the Beis Yosef. The Beis Yosef says Kol sheinu machal u'mashke briu also liochlo l'shtosa l'refuah dafka mishi yesh lo mechush bi'alma. Unbelievable chiddush to the Beis Yosef. He says the following: we're talking about something that is not normally eaten. It's not meichel briim. Healthy people don't take it. He wants to take it l'shem refuah. Hands down, this should be awesome. He says no. If he is suffering from something, he's got a mechush. Again, he's not a chola. Chola shein bo sakana was allowed all refuah, but he's not a chola. He has a mechush. He has a headache. He has a heavy head, and he thinks that this machal, which is not machal briim, will help him and relieve him of the mechushim. That's us. Avolim ein lo mechush. If he's 100% healthy, now, Rabbi say, let's be honest about it. We're not dealing with crazy lunatics. Why would a person eat something that's not Michael Briam and he's perfectly healthy? And what's the answer? Vitamins. That's what we're dealing with here. We're talking about vitamins. We're talking about something that will strengthen the body, even though I'm healthy, and give me almost like an inoculation in the sense of chisun, so that either I won't contract a certain disease because my body is strong, or if I will contract the disease, I'll get a light case because my body is fighting it off. Says the Beis Yosef, it's mutter. Why? Because he's not in mechushim. He doesn't have any, so to speak, mikta sickness now. There are no symptoms whatsoever. And this is the heter for taking vitamins. And Sfaradim are very, very makel on vitamins on Shabbos because of this Beit Yosef. However, for Ashkenazic Jews, it's a problem because there's a long list of achronim, of poskim that disagree with Beit Yosef. And it starts with the Pri Megadim. It goes back even earlier than the Pri Megadim to the Levush. The Levush was a contemporary of the Beit Yosef. And they say that Asur lechol dvarim, elu means that which is not normally eaten by healthy people. Afilu murak miskamin lechazik mizgo shelo yechlash. She'eno chola achshav. He doesn't have mechuchim now, but he's taking something for refuah. In other words, the question is, what is refuah that was prohibited in this Gzeira on Shabbos? L'chaze gufo, when he's a bari, is that called a refuah? And the answer is, the Pri Megadim says that's called a refuah, and it's prohibited. So anything from 0 all the way up to, but not including a chole, who's in bed with fever, is included in this gzeira, this prohibition of taking something that's not a Michael Bria, like a vitamin. No healthy people would normally take vitamins. You take vitamin to strengthen the goof. Strengthening the goof and preventing machla is called refuah. The Beit Yosef says no. Refuah is only if you are in this situation where you need these vitamins. You have mechushim. You're not a chol. And on the last page of this tshuva, v'lachein nira ledina, he brings many poskim that try to reinterpret the Beit Yosef and put it into a different light, including Rav Moshe Feinstein and others. We don't have time now to go through the tshuva of Rav Moshe Feinstein, but harotzim lakachas vitaminim kidei limnoach choli shelo yavo, dahainu lechazek mizgam v'lo yavo le'em acholi. Im yavo le'em acholi, yeah, the one who takes these vitamins mechusad v'chazak fei. He says yesh makom lahat. We could be mati. However, elu shergishu cholcha, if he's at stage 1 of the disease, or he may have disease, and he's feeling general weakness of his body, v'choshvo she'ulai zeh higia machmas corona, he thinks that maybe he's already sick with corona, and these are the symptoms. Vayidei lekichas havitaminim ulai yisrapu o lefachot yischazke gufo keneged a corona v'yachlimo maher yoter. He could speed up the process of his recovery. Then he says, if he's a cholish yesh bo sakana, if he's at the point in the disease where he has to lay down in bed, he cannot walk on 2 feet, then it's mutter. But imhu cholish imu eno chole, right? Im lo haylo ki im mechush bi alma. This is the last line in the tshuva. Velokeach es ze lirapos oso choli, and he's not a chole. So technically, he's not a chole. He's taking something which is not Michael Briam, and he's doing it for health purposes, because right now he's feeling the disease coming on. He's not yet a chole. That's us. That's like a case, if you will, of someone who has a headache. Again, I'm not posking, you'll ask your local rav, but generally speaking, you can rely on me. You don't take aspirins on Shabbos. Again, if it's a migraine headache, chas v'sholom, that's a different story. That's a chole shein bo sakon. But if you're feeling, stomach cramps and headaches and all this kind of stuff, which is called mechushim, we don't take medicines on Shabbos. And the Gemara in Shabbos takes this very seriously, not like a super duper pious chumrah. So it's very interesting. You want to know whether to take zinc or vitamin C on Shabbos in order to fight off corona. He says it depends. Where are you? Are you someone who has corona or what seems to be corona, and you're fighting off the disease, but you're not a chol she'ein bo sakona, you're not in bed with fever, you have mechushim, then it's us. If, on the other hand, you are in a situation where right now you're a total 100% worried, you want to strengthen your body and give yourself some sort of antibodies, or strengthen your body with zinc and vitamin C and the like. Now I heard they added vitamin D to the list. The list keeps getting longer, and the drug companies are getting richer. In any event, then he says it's mut. And that's a kula that's based on Shuvas post the Pri Megadim. The Pri Megadim would say that it's asur. Why? Because it's not Michael Brian. And you're not a chole, so you fit into that category of preventing mechushim, of being mechazik the guf. The Pri Megadim and the levush before him would asur it. No vitamins on Shabbos. And kolshkein, and this is where everybody agrees, if you already have the stage of mechushim, but you're not a chole, then you're not allowed to take these vitamins.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you very well.
First of all, Mivtza is operation.
Operation. Okay, that's a little bit more of a technical term. A military operation. Thank you.
Second of all, with regards to Corona, so let's say I'm in that situation right now.
L'chaim.
I'm. So I've been taking this whole cocktail of vitamins, but why wouldn't you say that because the chayli is actually potentially very dangerous, that it's pikuach nefesh, that you should keep taking these prophylactic vitamins?
So that's probably
it shouldn't get worse.
Yeah, that's probably, Bobby, his heter in the case of Corona to take vitamins because of the serious nature of that disease. The Pri Megadim is talking in a general sense. I'm not going to allow you to take vitamins because you have mechuchim, but he's not talking about a fear that down the line you might have pikuach nefesh. That Reb Chaim Brisker was, in many situations, they asked him about questions about violating the Shabbos for chola and so forth and so on. And inevitably, he was always makel. So somebody said to Reb Chaim, that's what I heard from my Rebbe, why are you so makel? He says, I'm not being makel on Shabbos, I'm being machmer on pikuach nefesh. So in your case, and any case where there is a serious possibility of contracting a disease of that sort that could be dangerous, that's a whole different story.
I have it. It's not.
So Kolshkein, if you have it, I would say for sure, if you have it. But if you're in a situation of mechushim and you have no reason to believe that you're going to get into a cholish sakana situation, you just want to strengthen your body, that could be a problem. But again, keep in mind that his final conclusion is that even though it's not a Michael Briam and he's perfectly healthy at this point, it's mutter. Again, you have to keep in mind, he is perfectly healthy. And the Beit Yosef says if he's perfectly healthy, he's allowed to take something that's not a Michael Briam, even though he's taking it l'shem refuah. It's only when the vitamins or the machal shel cholim is being taken to zap something that exists, that's where the Pri Megadim prohibits it. And the final conclusion of Lahachil Samrav is that even in that situation, it's mutter. Why? Because it could lead to some more serious condition. Now, what we didn't get to today, and I've been pushing it off for a few weeks, and I apologize, is the big day chamudos regarding a woman and tvila in an ocean. So again, I think we have one more meeting before Pesach. Is that correct? Or maybe two? Well, we'll see how busy you are. You have to tell me, I don't know, there's a lot of chametz floating around, especially during Corona season. There's a lot of people are staying home. They're eating a lot of chametz. A lot of people are not careful about their diet during Corona. So there's a lot of chametz that we have to get rid of. And could be that second one. But next Wednesday, I think, b'li neder, we should be okay. Now, I am leaving from here, figuratively, not literally, to a bris. And one of my talmidim had a baby, and there's a Zoom bris.
Mazel tov.
That's where I'm going to now. All right, so we should hear good news, as I always end the shir. Thank